Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first in our series of 3 Duke alumni webinars, Achieving Breakthrough Performance with Ben Sands, Trinity Class of 2000. If you're just joining us, take a moment to fill out our poll so we can see who's here with us today. At the bottom of your screen, just a few housekeeping, you'll see a few icons. The only one you need to worry about is the chat icon. We'll be using this throughout the webinar to send you questions, and feel free to also use this to send questions to Ben. We'll also be monitoring the chat, and after Ben's presentation, he'll answer as many of them as he can get to, as well as the questions that you submitted to us through our online survey. Okay, so let's see, let's have a look at our poll. Great, it looks like we have a pretty good representation across class years, schools, and mostly the United States, but a couple of international people. We had one person register from Alaska. It doesn't look like he's joined us yet. I hope he will soon. Without further ado, anyway, let's jump in. I'd like to introduce Ben. Ben Sands is a Duke alumnus, performance coach, and the founder of Sands Leadership and the Personal Core Values Project. We're so thankful to have Ben here today for this exclusive benefit for Duke alumni and for the opportunity to really engage intentionally about our lives and careers. Take it away, Ben.
Hey, thank you, Susan. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from. It's really such a pleasure to be here. Susan and her team at the Alumni Development Group at Duke have been working on this project for over 3 years. So this is a really special moment and excited to be part of the launch of this Duke Alumni Education Series. We're going to dive right in. We're going to have a lot of fun today. This conversation is going to move fast. It's packed with insight and information. But most importantly, I want this to be actionable. I want you to be able to leave this call with a clear sense of next steps and perhaps some clarity around some questions that have been nagging you, either personally or professionally. In order to make that happen, I've created a simple notes document. If you haven't already, go to sandsleadership.com/notes. You can download this document. I would encourage you to print it out and use it as to follow along with our conversation today. A little bit about me, not much. My name is Ben Sands. I'm a performance coach, graduated from Duke in 2000. First 10 or so years of my life, with the short exception, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment, I was in management consulting. And about 8 years ago, got out of management consulting and got into this space that I am in now, started Sands Leadership. And today I work with companies around the world, both large and small, to help them improve performance. And my approach to performance improvement really starts with the individual and helping the individual leaders in an organization more effectively lead themselves, learn how to make great decisions amid conditions of uncertainty, ambiguity, and change. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today comes right off the front lines of that battle to more effectively lead in a corporate or organizational context, but most importantly, to make great decisions in a world where there is no crystal ball. So I'm going to share with you a lot of data that has been mined in these organizations, among many others, and hope that you'll be able to connect some dots in your own work personally or in your organization as well. So let's get started. First things first, I want to just check the chat function. We're going to use the chat. That's going to be a predominant way of communicating here. Looks like we got over 150 people dialed in right now. Do me a favor, just pop into the chat function, send a note to everybody. Let us know where you are dialing in from and what class year you are. So I'm going to go and model this here. Send you all a chat. Ben Sands, I am in Charleston, South Carolina. Beautiful day here. And Trinity 00. All right, look at this. We got a lot of folks dialing in. I love it. Nita, Greg, Larry, I can't even keep up. Kayla, Nicole, Amir, San Fran, Baltimore, Virginia, Durham. Yes, Bolivia, Sacramento. Oh man, this is awesome. This is what's so cool about this. All people around the world connected through our relationship with Duke. Awesome. All right, Jackie, Andrew, San Fran, Durham, Atlanta, Hasina, nice to see you. I love it. Okay, so use this chat function. If you have questions throughout the conversation, as soon as you have a question, type it into the chat function. I will not be looking at these questions because I can't walk and chew gum at the same time, but Susan and our team at the alumni group in the alumni office are going to be tracking all that. And as Susan mentioned, at the end of the conversation, we'll pull up and answer any and all questions that you might have. All right, let's do this. All right, we want to kick it off with a question. When you hear, hold on, just got to get into my slides. Oh, first things first, let's cover, here's 3 things that we're going to cover today, right? Number 1, we're going to talk about how to build clarity and confidence, momentum, even if you felt stuck for a while. I'm also going to share how to defeat burnout and overwhelm in the event that either of those things are affecting you right now, even if you're feeling completely out of balance. And lastly, we're going to talk about how to create a life of purpose, passion, and impact, even if you're currently struggling just to get out of bed in the morning. And I know that there are some of you on this call. That's okay. And we're going to talk about why that is and ultimately how to course correct, how to fix it. All right. But before we dive into solving the problems, I want to talk about outcomes. And to get there, I want to ask a very specific question. I'm going to need you to answer this in the chat function. When you hear the word successful, who's the first person to come to mind? When you hear the word successful, who's the first person to come to mind? Type it into the chat function. Got a few Oprahs already: Bill Gates, Obama, me, Tom Brady, the GOAT, amen. LeBron, Elon Musk, Coach K. That took a little too long, I think, guys. There's a few more Coach K's. Michelle Obama, Jane Goodall, Pete Carroll. Where's mom? Oh, yeah, there we go. Nita. Parents, right? Mom and dad are typically part of this equation. Fantastic. Answer this question. Everybody on this call, answer the question. If you type it in the chat function or not, just answer this question. Incredibly important to have an answer to this question. Here are a few of the people that are often cited when I ask this question to other audiences. So we've got Melinda Gates, Coach K, Mandela, Oprah, Mother Teresa, Branson, Sheryl Sandberg, Yo-Yo Ma. And can anybody identify the person in the upper right picture there? Blonde hair? Yeah, J.K. Rowling. A few Harry Potter fans on the call. Beautiful. All right. So you've got your what we're going to call success role model, right? This is the first person to come to mind when you hear the word successful. Now I want to do a little benchmarking. I want you to score yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the level of success of your success role model. Where are you on a scale of 1 to 10 today? Where are you on a scale of 1 to 10 today? Type it into the chat function. Awesome. Looks like we got everything from 1 to 9. Come on, any 10s? All right, love it. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So this is our baseline. This is our baseline. And if I were to oversimplify what I hope to help you achieve through this call, it's not necessarily to get to 10, although that's my aspiration. That's my hope for you over the long term. But today, whether you're at 1 or 2 or 5 or 6, my hope is that you'll have better clarity about how to get to that next level. Right? If you're at 2, it's how to get to 3. If you're at 5, it's how to get to 6. If you're at 7, it's how to get to 8, and so on and so forth. All right, that's our goal today. But in order to figure out how do we get past or get to that next level, the first question we have to ask is, what's holding us back? Before we get into the root cause understanding, a couple of assumptions on which this entire talk is based. And if any of these assumptions are not true, you're probably not going to enjoy this call, right? But these are the foundational assumptions I'm making as I put this talk together. So number 1, you are smart, you work really hard, and you want to be a 10. Right? You're smart, you work really hard, and you want to be a 10. And maybe you don't want to be Michelle Obama. Maybe you don't want to be Bill Gates specifically, but you want to achieve role model level success. The final assumption, and I think it's been proven true through the data that we've just collected right now, is that you're not there yet, right? Despite the fact that you are smart. Right? Despite the fact that you work really, really hard, and despite the fact that you know you want to be a 10, you're not there yet. So the question is, why not? right? What's holding you back? This is perhaps the hardest question I've asked so far, but I want you to take a second right now. What's holding you back from maybe not getting to 10, but if you're at 2, what's holding you back from 3? If you're at 5, what's holding you back from 6? What's holding you back personally? Take a second to think about it. And if you're willing, pop it into the chat function or pop it into chat. Awesome. Confidence, discipline, inability to prioritize, time, fear of failure, fear, overwhelm, negative mindset, insecurity. Wow. Thank you, guys. Holy cow. Amen. I'm just loving the self-awareness here on in this chat. Guys, this is the first step in getting to that next level, is identifying, recognizing what is holding you back, and your willingness to put it out here. This is the start of this. Now, I've asked this question to lots and lots of rooms like this, right? Full of men and women who are smart, who are driven, and have access to resources that 99% of the world would kill to have access to. And that's another assumption I'm making. By virtue of the fact that you're on this call, that you have had access to the resources that Duke provides, we're in the 1%, right? Maybe not financially, of course, but we're in a unique community of men and women who have access to resources that a great majority of the world don't have access to. So this gives us both special opportunity, but also special responsibility to work through the things that are holding us back to get to that next level. So let me share with you again some of the other common challenges, and I just love what you've shared in the chat. And again, you're going to see the consistency among other groups with whom I have had this conversation. Time, distraction, struggling to say no, getting out of balance, tired, stuck. And then something I didn't see, although the chat was moving pretty quickly, is a sense of, the problem is I'm at 7 and I'm not quite sure it's worth it to get to 8. I'm pretty darn comfortable. I'm not at role model level success, but I'm pretty comfortable right now. And it's hard to get motivated to get to that next level, to do the work required. That's going to be a relevant issue for some of you on this call. And if so, just make a note in your notes document about that, because we're going to come back to that in just a moment. So how do we move forward? Right? What do we do to get to that next level? Well, I am very much a data-driven kind of guy. And while there's a variety of different approaches that you can take to moving past these roadblocks, my first step is always, what do the best do? To ask that question. What are the people who are already there, who are already ahead of me? What are they doing or have they done to get past these same challenges that I am currently experiencing? So you probably have a few role models in your life, people that you look up to, coaches, mentors, friends, who seem to have moved past the things that are holding you back. We also have the benefit of a lot of amazing research out there that have really focused in specifically on this issue. And one piece of research that I love comes from the research from Gartner. A couple of years ago, Gartner led a study of over 23,000 executives at over 300 companies around the world. And what they were looking for is they wanted to identify the breakthrough performance, the 10s in these corporate ecosystems. And what they were looking to understand is, what's the difference between the 10s and everybody else? What specific competencies do these 10s, and I'm using that as a proxy for this idea of breakthrough performance or success, what is it that these 10s do better than everybody else? And let's learn from that and hopefully embed these skills or build these skills in the rest of our organization. So here, what we're looking at here, there's a lot of data. Let me just break it out. On the x-axis, you have all the various competencies that had some positive correlation to employee success based upon this large study of, again, over 20,000 employees at over 300 companies. And you can see on that x-axis, the horizontal, these competencies, things like critical thinking, I'm trying to read it myself, creativity, managing others, learning agility, information management, continuous learning, resource allocation, customer orientation. If you work in a big company, you recognize some of these terms, right? These are like buzzwords that you hear coming from both the C-suite as down to the HR department. Here's the thing. What we found through this study, all of these things matter, but there was a small subset of competencies that stood out for their impact on employee success. And here they are. These competencies, illustrated by the blue bars, represented the companies that had the greatest impact on or correlation to employee success. And what you see when you look at these, and I've sort of pulled those out and to make it easier to read on this slide, you see a very interesting theme, right? If you were to look at somebody, or if I told you, hey, I have identified an individual who does all these things very, very well, what word might you use to describe an individual who does all of these things very, very well? If anybody's got an idea, type it into the chat function. I'll give you just a second. Disciplined, efficient, and boom, Chris, McD, Katie, leader, right? These are leadership competencies, right? But more importantly, it's not necessarily about leading others, right? Competencies of effective self-leadership. And so I want to make the case today that in order for you to get to the next level, we can identify a place to start right here. Right? There's a whole bunch of things I know that are working against you, external forces that are making it harder for you to do what you want or have to do. I know that, I get it. But if you want to take first steps today, my suggestion is start here, right? Start with things that are fully in your control. And I like to oversimplify things. It's sort of my nature. Keep it simple, right? And so I've distilled down this idea of self-leadership into what I call the 3 critical questions. And here they are. Number 1, who am I? Number 2, what do I want? Number 3, what must I do? If you want to get to the next level, whether that be 3 or 5 or 10, the first step is being able to answer each of these critical questions with clarity and confidence. Now, come on, these are simple questions, right? Of course, you're saying, Ben, of course I can answer these questions. Who am I? What do I want? How can I not answer these questions? Well, I already know that you, me, and men and women like us often really, really struggle to answer these questions. Really struggle to say with confidence and clarity, here's who I am, here's what I want, and therefore, here's what I'm going to do to make it happen. Now, these questions all map back to the competencies that I just mentioned a moment ago. Who I am relates to self-awareness. What do I want? Prioritization and judgment. What must I do? Proactivity, influence, and execution. All right, let's just make a quick check-in. Everybody with me? Just type in yes in that chat function. Make sure we're all on the same page. All right, okay, yeah, love it, love it, love it, love it. Boom. Man, it's so fun to see that chat box explode. All right, so what we're gonna do today is we're gonna get started on answering these questions, right? That's our first step in figuring out, or helping you get to that position of breakthrough. All right, so I'm gonna start with the first question, who am I? Who are you? Right? How hard can this be, right? Candidly, not to overshare, but when I left Duke, I had no freaking idea who I was. None. And it didn't fully, I didn't even realize that this was a relevant question or that this was something that I needed to figure out until I met this guy. All right, first person to identify this guy gets a candy bar. Chat, oh, there we go, Amir, nailed it. And we got a few. There's a few, this is CJ Skender. CJ was my financial accounting professor my senior year at Duke. Many of you may have had CJ at Fuqua. He is legend at Duke. He's been one of the top rated professors for a very, very long time. And for those of you who follow the business personal development books, Wharton professor Adam Grant wrote a book called Give and Take and actually featured CJ. And his unique and generous style of teaching. And he is one of the best. And he taught me and many, many, many others how to balance debits and credits, financial accounting. But those who have taken CJ will remember he always stopped and at the end of his last class had this special presentation where he stopped teaching finance and accounting and started sharing all this other wisdom that he had accumulated throughout his life. Just a beautiful man with incredible, just some incredible insights. And I remember in my last class, the senior year, CJ said this. He goes, for those of you who have accounting, consulting or law or banking jobs lined up, good for you. That's great. You worked really hard to get those. Good for you. He's like, but this is some advice for those who haven't yet figured out what they want to do with their life. And he said simply, if you haven't yet figured out what you want to do with your life, That's okay. Most people are in that same boat. But my advice is do what you love to do. Do what you love to do. And he said, when you do what you love to do, the money follows. You get really good at that thing and theoretically get paid to do it. But, and I still remember this clear as day, I think he was about 55 at the time. He goes, but when you get to be my age, right, even if the money doesn't follow, you're still doing what you love to do. And that's what really matters when you get out of bed in the morning. Or he said, that's what really matters when you get to be my age, when you get out of bed in the morning. And so it was the first moment when I said, what do I love, right? And it was this sort of another way of approaching this question, who am I, right? What do I love? And at the time, I didn't have a very good grasp on that either. But the one thing I knew to be true is that I loved to ski. So after a brief tour in New York City, a distraction in the grand scheme of things, I ended up here in Aspen. And I went out there literally with Skender's voice in my mind. I'm going to do what I love to do. I always loved to ski. So I was going to move to a ski town. I was going to become a ski instructor, and I was going to have a mountain town experience. And here's what I learned, that while Professor Skender's advice was well-intentioned, it wasn't true, because I had done what I loved to do. I skied 115 days my first season in Aspen. And sadly, at the end of that season, I was just as lost, dejected, and demoralized as I had been when I was living in Times Square. In fact, I was more lost, dejected, and demoralized because when I was living in New York, I'd always thought, well, when things get bad enough, I'm just going to quit my job and move to Aspen. And now, that was my plan B. I had no plan C. And then I was given a great gift, and a gift that I'm so thankful to be able to share with you. I literally stumbled into one of the most significant mentor relationships of my life. And it was with this guy. His name's Pat O'Donnell. And at the time, he was the CEO of the Aspen Ski Company. And I had reached out to him really on a whim. I had read a little article about him. And by the time I got to the bottom of this article, I said, gosh, this is the guy he has lived the life that I aspire to emulate. Right? He has done things that I hope I can do in my life. So I sent him a note. And it turns out he was my boss. He was the CEO of the Aspen Ski Company. I sent him a note on a whim, said, hey, you don't know me. I work for you, but I read this article. You've lived a life I aspire to emulate and would love to pick your brain and ask you about the decisions you made when you were my age. And much to my amazement, he shot me an email right back and said, hey, I'd be happy to come in tomorrow morning. We'll make some coffee and we'll go from there. And Pat, again, became an incredible mentor to me. But the most important thing that Pat taught me was the importance of answering this question, who am I? And he had a very, I think, compelling way to approach it. At the end of the day, Pat used to say, you are your values, right? Your values define who you are. And in a world full of both opportunity and uncertainty, right, your values in many ways are your only safety net. So his charge to me at that moment was, Ben, you've got to figure out who you are. Specifically, you've got to figure out your values. Not just some arbitrary collection of nice sounding words, but the very specific set of principles, beliefs, and standards that are guiding and driving your decision-making. They're there somewhere in the back of your mind. They exist. You need to know what they are and start acting accordingly. So that's what I want to lead you on. I want to help you take that step too. And first things first, let's get clear on what a value is. Right? Because this is, especially if you're in the corporate world, you've heard values. You'd probably roll your eyes when you hear talk about corporate values and core values and all that. I'm here to tell you that values are the foundation of a successful, what I often refer to as a regret-free life, right? Our values are essentially the standards, the principles of beliefs, depending on the word, you can use whatever, that are guiding our decision-making and behavior. And critically, they serve as the basis for our interaction with others. We judge others, right, individually and their behaviors based upon our own personal core values. Now, I could do a whole nother hour on how values are at the root of values. A lack of values awareness is at the root of a lot of the political upheaval that we're experiencing in our world right now. But for the time being, I just want you to focus on you, right? What are your personal core values? Now, there are lots of values out there. You're looking at over 200 words that reflect values on this slide. But one of the challenges of values is that when you look at this slide, and we encourage you to do this, when you look at this slide, gosh, all of these words are compelling. Like there's no bad value on this in this list. And here's the rub, right? If there's no bad value, right, then we run into the challenge of, or the temptation to value everything, right? But unfortunately, if you value everything, you value nothing. And so I want to suggest that you actually don't value everything. Even though these are all good words, there is a small subset of values that I would describe as your core values. These are the standards that you prioritize. Maybe you describe them as first among equals, right? But these are the small, 3 to 5, that have played the most predominant role in your life, in your decision-making to date. Now, there's a lot more we can unpack with respect to values, and we'll talk a little bit more about them in just a moment. But the challenge has always been, how do I simplify a list of 200 plus words down to 3 or 5? Well, we got an assist, actually by a team of researchers based at both Duke and University of North Carolina, among other institutions. And what this team did over the course of a decade is that they distilled that long list of values, 200 plus words, through a process called factor analysis into, and identified 14, what they would describe as most common values, right? They probably call them factors, but to be less statistical, 14 most common values. And here's what they discovered. Here are the 14. Now, these 14 this is not like the only values that exist, but what they're saying is that a word like achievement, right, would represent a subset of values all meaning something similar. So achievement, might be the value of success, or drive, or ambition, right? Financial prosperity, a value that represents, the accumulation of wealth, money, personal finance. So all of these values, these 14 values, sort of represent a variety of other values. But we use these 14 as a way of simplifying the values landscape so that we can more easily and accurately identify our personal core values. So everyone has a set of personal core values, 3 or 5 of these words that are first among equals. You'll see on your notes document, the one that you downloaded at the start of the call, sandsleadership.com/notes. You'll see all of these words on that notes document. I would encourage you, just for the sake of just to get this process going, look at that list and see if you can identify the 3 or 5 values that stand out from this list, that have had the greatest impact or influence on your decision-making and behavior. And that's important. It's not just about the words you like best. It's about the words that have been at foundation to your decision-making and behavior. All right, so take a second right now and see if you can identify a list, your top core values. As Susan mentioned, I'm in the process of doing a large-scale project to really go deep on this topic of core values. I call it the Personal Core Values Project. You can learn more at personalcorevalues.com. This is a tool and assessment that I use for my coaching clients, but it's just an easy way through a behavioral analysis to identify the values that are most active in your life today. All right, so those are our personal core values, right? And when it comes to answering that question, who am I? This is the first step, right? You are what you value. And what's interesting is that your values are not right or wrong, right? They're just true. And that's why values are so important and so revealing or relevant to that question, who am I? Because underneath all of these values is a story, right? A story about the person you learned that value from, the experience that helped you shape that value, the reality that is driving the prioritization of that value in your life today. So if we're going to answer the question, who am I, with confidence, we start with values. All right, now let's move on to the second question. What do I want? Again, how hard can this be, right? What do you want? Well, this is a shockingly hard question to answer, even for people who give it a lot of time and attention. I want to run us through a simple exercise, right? I want you to imagine, right, it is the end of 2019. And once you imagine you have a magic wand right now, and you have waved your magic wand and achieved any specific outcome between now and the end of 2019, What would you wish for if you had that magic wand? What would you do? What would you create? What problem would you solve if you could solve, create, or satisfy any issue in your life today? Maybe it would be to pay off your student loan debt. I suspect there's a little bit of that on this call. Right? Maybe it would be to get that next great professional opportunity. Maybe it would be to find that next great love. Take a second right now and please plug it into the chat function. What would you wish for if you had a magic wand? What problem would you solve? Maybe it would be to get healthy. I suspect there's cancer survivors on this call. Maybe it's to get rid of the cancer in your body or maybe in the body of a loved one. Maybe it would be to move closer to your family. Maybe it would be to get your 2-year-old potty trained, which is on my list of my short list for 2019. Awesome. I'm reading all the chats. Thank you. Healthy and travel, husband, a green card, self-sustaining business, hike the AT. Absolutely. I grew up in Connecticut. I love the AT. Healthy, Harry Potter, fulfilling and lucrative job, experience the right job. Awesome. I love it. Well, here's the thing. I am hopeful that all of these wishes come true this year, but I'm not optimistic. You see, this question is a setup. And I use this question to highlight the mistake that we all make when it comes to trying to identify what we really want. And I'm going to tell you a story from another client to really illustrate this mistake. And so I'm sitting in Washington, D.C. Before I moved to Charleston. I lived in Washington, and I was working with a young man, relatively young man, early 30s, who, like you and me, was incredibly smart, was incredibly driven, and had access to resources that 99% of the world would kill to have access to. And he didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. So he calls me up and says, "Hey, Ben, can you help me think through this?" And so we sat down, and I asked him this question: wave your magic wand. And he knew exactly, immediately, what he wanted. Here was his answer: I'll be the president's energy advisor. Now, this guy was already working on the Hill in the Senate subcommittee on the environment, double master's degrees in environmental science and economics. This was a guy who could become the president's energy advisor. This was a totally in reach goal, right? But as I mentioned, it represents the mistake that we all make. So when he said this to me, my first question, which is the question that I, as a coach, get paid to ask more often than not, is why? Why do you want to be the president's energy advisor? And here's how this conversation played out. So after, he gave me a little bit of an eye roll, like, duh, like who wouldn't want to be the president's energy advisor, right? But I implored him, come on, play along. And so he did, and he gave it a little bit of thought. And his first answer: energy expertise will always be in demand. Okay, so why does that matter? Very quickly: I'll never have to worry about finding a job. See where we're going here? He says he wants to be the president's energy advisor, but what's he really after? You can type it in the chat function if you want. What's he really want? That's right. Security. Mark, Chris, Cynthia, you got it. Boom. He's really after security. That got his attention. I say, let's keep going. Why else do you want to be the president's energy advisor? He says, I have the ability. I said, okay, why does that matter? He says, I can and want to have a major impact. Is this sounding familiar to anybody on the call? I suspect so. But now I asked why. Why does that matter? And here there was a long pause, and in a voice barely above a whisper, he says, society respects people who do big things. He said he wants to be the president's energy advisor. What's he really want? Yeah, you got it. Recognition, respect. And looks like Daryl, you nailed it. A sense of significance. It's the synonym for all of these words that you're using in the chat. Now I really had his attention. We kept going. His next answer: the earth needs help. Finally, right? Like, I'm like, save the freaking planet. This is where I thought we were going from the very beginning. I did not know this was going to unfold in this way, right? Save the planet. But look how this ends, right? The earth needs help. Okay, great. We're going to save the planet. Great. Why? He says, the earth is an underdog. Okay, again, from a coaching perspective, that's a really loaded term. That's really interesting, right? Like, okay, what is underdog? Why does underdog matter? Was my question. And again, long pause. And here I learned something I'd never known about him. But he said, I understand what it's like to be an underdog. I'm not going to, share that story, but, to simplify it or to paraphrase, he had spent a number of years on the outside looking in as someone who wanted to be a part of a group that was never really invited into the group. And so he really associated with this sense of underdog. And when he looked at the earth, looked at the planet, looked at what was happening, that touched his desire and need for connection, right? Felt a sense of connection to the planet. And then finally, why else do you want to be the president's energy advisor? The energy space is exciting. Why does that matter to you? And again, this may resonate with some folks on the call. I'm bored. I'm bored in my current role. I want something new. What's he really after? The opposite of boredom. You could call it excitement. I like to refer to it as growth. And herein lies the challenge of answering the question, what do I want? Because we have been taught to set goals, right? To identify the top of the mountain and go take it down, right? To go achieve that thing, that title, that status, that relationship, whatever the case may be, right? But the mistake we all make is that we set thing goals when what we're really after are the feelings we associate with having that thing. My guess, and you double check, you pressure test this, right? Take a look at your magic wand aspiration. I would bet that you can map back that magic wand aspiration to at least one, if not all, of these 4 foundational needs: security, significance, connection, and growth. So here's what they are, right? And this is the thing that makes us human, right? We all have the same needs. At a core, we're the need for security, certainty, stability, the ability to avoid pain, connection, a sense of connection or belonging to yourself and others, significance, to matter, to be important, to be valued, and finally to grow, to learn, evolve, and make progress. The image I use on this slide is of a bucket. And I like to say, metaphorically speaking, every human being walks around the world carrying 4 big buckets representing each one of these foundational needs. When your buckets are full, meaning when you have a high degree of security, connection, significance, and growth, you feel awesome, right? That is engagement. That is peak performance. That is energy, excitement, enthusiasm. It's also what we often refer to as passion, right? And if for those who are seeking purpose or want a greater sense of purpose, well, I suspect you've struggled to identify your purpose because it's an almost impossible question to answer unless you know this, right? Purpose is really just a combination of your significance and connection buckets. When your significance and connection buckets are very, very full, you feel a great deal of purpose. So this is what makes us human. This is what makes us, all of us, everyone on this call and everyone we've ever met shares these 4 foundational needs. And the psychology majors on the call, anybody want to pop into this? Oh, Larry, you already nailed it, right? This is Maslow, right? And I see St. Anita referencing St. Augustine. Yes, it's true. It's all connected, right? This is a foundation of human psychology. But here's the thing, right? If we all share the same needs, why don't we all do the same things, right? What gives? Like, we don't all want the same things. We don't all do the same things. But if we're all trying to meet the same needs, why? What makes us different? Well, we just learned, right? We all have the same needs, but what we want depends on our values. So let me just explain how this plays out. I'm going to use this simplified version of this. Let me just explain. Give me 1 second before I do to take a sip of water from my Duke cup, special cup for today. All right, so here we go. Let's start with the security bucket. Again, this is just an example. There's a gajillion examples that I could reference here. So let's just imagine for the sake of discussion, right? Your number 1 core value is financial prosperity, right? This is that desire to build a high net worth, to make a lot of money. So imagine you're this person and your number 1 value is financial prosperity. Again, remember, no right or wrong, no good or bad when it comes to values, just true, right? There's a whole bunch of good things that happen when people value financial prosperity. All right, so if your number 1 value is financial prosperity, what would you imagine you'd have to do in order to feel a great deal of security? What do you need to make a lot of? Type it in the chat. Money, Ariella, nailed it, right? Big bags of cash are going to lead to a higher level of security in your life. But now imagine your number 1 core value is spirituality. Right? This is faith. This is a belief in the divine. What fills your security bucket? Big bags of cash? No. What fills your security bucket is more likely prayer. And Denise, you nailed it. Church interaction, right? Time spent with God, as Nita said, right? So here we are. It's the same foundational need. Two completely different approaches to meeting that need, all based upon what value you prioritize, financial prosperity or spirituality. Now, to be clear, you can have an individual who has financial prosperity first and spirituality second, right? So that person, hypothetically, might make a lot of money, but probably gives a lot of it back to the church after he or she has made it, right? So it's not like they're not mutually exclusive. I'm just using these simple examples to highlight the point that our values drive our behavior and ultimately allow us to identify the path to meeting the needs that we need to meet, okay? So connection, same thing. If your number one value is loyalty, right? You might meet that need for connection by spending time and building relationships with your team at work, right? Someone who high loyalty is likely to stay at a job once he or she has committed to the job. You all know those folks who say, you know what, you got to stay at a job for 2 or 3 years. You can't just hop from job to job, right? That's the loyalty value asserting itself. Now, if your number one core value is concern for the environment, well, you might meet that need for connection like my friend, the president's energy advisor, right? By spending time in the woods, right? By spending time in the environment, maybe even working to preserve and protect that environment. Significance, how do you meet your needs for significance? If your number one core value is achievement, right? Where does your sense of significance come from? Well, it might come from winning, right? From being the best, right? If you also went to Duke, you probably know a few of these, and I suspect there are a few on the call, right? Myself included, right? We'd like to win, like to be the best, like to get into the top school, right? Achieve the top promotion or level. But if your number one core value is concern for others, where does your sense of significance come from? Well, not necessarily winning, but helping others win, right? Or taking care of others. Again, same bucket, right? Same need that's being met, but very dramatically different reasons or approaches to meeting that same need. Is it starting to become clear how important this values awareness is? And I hope you're starting to connect the dots between why a friend, a spouse, a coworker, a colleague is so adamantly wrong all the time, right? Chances are he or she is not wrong. It's just that they are processing the information that you're sharing or that we're all receiving through a different set of values. And that the values that they process the information through and act on behalf of are going to lead to very different outcomes. So values awareness is such an important part, not just for you getting to where you want to go, but also to creating really, really healthy, high-performing teams. And finally, growth. If your number one core value is creativity, right? Where's your sense of growth and excitement come from? New ideas, right? Among other things. I mean, this is just a very simple example. But what if your number one core value is health? Where does your sense of growth come from? Well, it may come from not just exercising and getting healthy, but competing in some kind of health-related activity. So the Ironman or whatever. And it's so funny because I never understood why people would compete in Ironmans and do all that until, of course, I learned this work. And now I don't judge people who train for Ironmans. I support the heck out of them. Okay. I hope you will too. All right. So who am I? What do I want? The secret to understanding what you want. We all want the same thing, right? But it's that interplay between what we want and what we value that ultimately drives what we do. And so here is, a high level overview of the buckets and the values, but this is the money slide here. And this is on your notes, fill it in, super simple, but this is critical, right? When it comes to getting to 10, to achieving breakthrough performance at work or at home, here's the recipe, here's the secret, right? It's when our actions, what we do, the decisions we make, the choices we make, allow us to meet our needs, to fill those buckets of security, connection, significance, and growth in a manner consistent with our values. In other words, what you do allows you to get what you want in a manner consistent with who you are. Everybody on the call today who is at 8 or lower on their role model success, I can guarantee you there is some disconnect in your life right now as it relates to this equation. You may be meeting your needs, right, but not in a manner consistent with your values. You may be living your values, but not doing so in a way that's consistent with your needs. Right? And now, two very general examples, and I'm not trying to call out any professions or whatever. There's always, every profession has an opportunity, right, for the right person to be fully engaged, satisfied, over the moon happy, right? But two examples that I often see, a corporate lawyer can meet their needs, his or her needs, at a high level. You can be financially secure, you can be connected to your coworkers, you can achieve high levels of success, partnership, and you can grow, right? You can do interesting work, right? But where I often run into, where corporate lawyers come to me, is that they don't like the billable hour, right? And so in many ways, put another way, their value of independence is often compromised by that work. Let's go the other way, right? Someone who joins the Peace Corps or works for a nonprofit, doing work that so directly aligns with their personal core values, but because of the nature of the work, sometimes they're not quite sure they can make ends meet. Right, that security bucket is way too low for them to feel comfortable with continuing on that path forward. So your goal, as it relates to divining that path forward, is to connect the dots. Right, is to find, take actions, make decisions that allow you to meet your needs in a manner consistent with your values. But most importantly, the first step is to identify, what do you need and what do you value? Too often, people just start with, what am I going to do? And when we do that, we run into what we call the paradox of choice. There's, for someone like you and me, smart, driven, access to resources, there's almost an unlimited number of things that we could do. Right? So we need to answer these questions. What are my needs and what are my values? Because it allows us to simplify the opportunities that would likely lead us to highest level of success and performance. So here's the critical alignment. Actions allow you to meet your needs in a manner consistent with your values. All right, now we're going to turn our attention to the game plan. Right, this is the first, kind of setting everything up. Now let's talk about what specifically you need to do to take these ideas and start making progress. All right, before we do that, quick check in the chat. Just type in yes if you're with me. Yes if you're enjoying this. Yeah, awesome. Go Duke. Maybe a Zion reference, whatever. Yes times 3. Josh, thank you. This is cool. All right, let's keep it rolling. So let's get back to benchmarking. I like data. You like data too. Let's do a quick self-assessment. Here are your buckets. How full are they today? Again, on your notes section, you have there's little boxes related to buckets. On a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 is full to overflowing, I want you to do a quick self-assessment. How do you feel today? What's your level of security, connection, significance, and growth in your life today? Take a second, give your a 1 to 10 score for each of the buckets, and then you can see on the notes, add them all up. Add them all up. And I want a total score here. Total score. When you're done, type it into the chat function just so I know that we've had enough time to do this math. Cool. Thanks, guys. Awesome. Total score. Beautiful. Love it, love it, love it. All right, let's do a little benchmarking here. So, in my completely subjective and arbitrary quantitative assessment here, and that, to be clear, this is completely arbitrary and subjective, but it's still a useful jumping off point. 32 or above, you are in the breakthrough zone. Denise, well done, 34, right? Love it. 4 to 20, this is what I call the opportunity zone. I call it opportunity zone because your buckets on average are, 5 or lower, right? And all I know is that there is some significant amount of pain associated with that. And in no way, shape, I'm not minimizing that at all. But the reason I call this the opportunity zone is, candidly, you have enough pain to find the motivation to get out of there. right? To get out of that zone. And I hope after this call, it's going to be crystal clear. Here are the things that I need to do to stop this, right? To get out of this painful zone. You know who I'm really worried about though? Right? Sorry, guys. Everybody else. And I suspect this is the majority of the men and women on this call. And I call it the danger zone. And if anyone wants to guess why I use the term danger zone, feel free to chime in. This is the danger zone. And the danger zone is the danger zone because it is the zone of complacency. Yes, comfortable, comfort zone. Yes, 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 yes. I love it. I love it. I love it. Yes, this is the painful zone. All right. So here we go. How do we get out of that danger zone? Here's the 5-step game plan. I'm just doing a quick time check. Looks like it's already 1:20. Holy smokes. So I'm going to move through this pretty quickly so we can wrap up with at least a few minutes for questions. My offer to you guys is, if you have to hop, just type the chat, send me an email, ben@sandsleadership.com, and I can answer any questions that have come up if you have a hard stop at 1:30 Eastern time. All right. So 5 steps. Number 1, got to be intentional. This is a mindset shift, right? And this is tactically, there's nothing here other than you have to fully own your outcomes, right? There, again, I mentioned this before. There's a ton of stuff working against you right now. I get it. But the reality is, if you are going to create a life that you love, if you're going to get out of this danger zone or the opportunity zone or stay in that breakthrough zone, it's going to be up to you. You have to own your outcomes. You have to be intentional. I was given a talk like this at Georgetown, and this little piece of data drove me insane, right? I asked people, do you have written goals and a plan to achieve them? Over 85% said no, right? That doesn't make any sense, right? No sense whatsoever. We would never tolerate that level of rigor and discipline in the organizations that we work for. Imagine you walk into your boss's office and say, "Hey, boss, do we have a plan? Do we have goals?" And like, "Yeah, let's just kind of play it by ear. Let's figure it out as we go." Right? What? I don't want to come back to this place. I don't want to work for this kind of company. Right? And yet, most of us are running our lives that way. Right? That doesn't make sense. It's time to get our head out of the sand. Right? Be intentional. As Yogi says, if you don't know where you're going, you might end up someplace else. Number 2, discover your core values. We spend a lot of time on core values. I'm not going to overdo this. This is a must, right? You've got to know who you are, right? And this is the secret really to managing all the different options that you have in front of you and making tough decisions with confidence. And for those who are struggling to say no, these values become the foundation to saying no without fear. Values influence what you like and what you don't. And they also help you and hold you back. There's a whole bunch of interesting conversation to be had about how the values, the things that even make you who you are, also and oftentimes have a downside to them. So values help you and they hold you back. Number 3, develop a vision. Now, quickly type into the chat box, who's this guy? It is not Coach K. Anybody? This is Gino Auriemma. Yeah, UConn fans will know him. He's the head coach of the UConn Women's Huskies, incredibly successful. I always start the conversation about vision with Gino, because despite all of his success, in a recent article, he says, "I feel in some ways so unfulfilled." And asked to explain that statement, he said, "I never set out to be a women's basketball coach. I never set out to do any of this." That breaks my heart. And I'm reminded of a quote from Thomas Merton, that some people spend their whole lives climbing the ladder of success only to realize that once they reach the top, the ladder's leaning against the wrong wall. Your choice is to define. We're all trying to climb the ladder. The hard work is prerequisite to success. We want to do the work, right? Your choice, your challenge is to pick the right wall. And that's why you need a vision. You need a clear, vivid description of the life you want to create and the outcomes you want to achieve 3 to 5 years from now. It's the problem, it's the impact, it's the difference, it's the way you want to live. And this is a quote from Jim Rohn: "Success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure." And as successful as Gino Auriemma has been, I can't help but associate this quote with him. All right, finally, do less better. Number 4, I'm sorry, I'm moving a little quickly because I want to make sure that we can wrap with a little time for questions here. But we are constantly caught up in a desire to do more faster, right? Instead of doing more faster, do less better. And it all comes down to the data, right? I mean, there is a clear clear data that shows the way we're working isn't working. And I like to map it back to the success paradox, that when we're focused, when we're clear, we are successful. But here's the irony, is that once you achieve success, now you typically have more options. And with more options, it leads to greater distraction or diffusion of effort. And that distraction or diffusion of effort will then ultimately set the stage for our failure. So we have to avoid this success paradox, and we have to think strategically. So strategy 101, just like a good corporate strategy, you should have a good personal strategy, right? A sense of where you are and where you want to go. That's your vision. Your strategy is the set of assumptions about how you're going to get there. Your values create the playing field. They chalk the field, if you will. And then ultimately, this is why we set goals, right? Our goals or objectives are the specific steps that will allow us to get from where we are to where we want to go. This is the case for setting goals. A lot of folks have just written off goals as silly. Well, it maps back to that mistake that we all make, but goals in and of themselves are not silly. It's the way that we set them. And then ultimately our plan is, how do we allocate our time, energy, and resource? Great book on this topic, Essentialism, and a quote from Greg McKeown, the author. If you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. Amen. So true. Take that as gospel. Last but not least, step 5, embrace accountability. Accountability, right? The number one reason you're going to fail to hit your goals this year, there's a million different options out there. But if I was a betting man, which I am not, I would count on this. This is the whirlwind. The whirlwind is the massive amount of time and energy it takes just to live your life every day. The whirlwind is your overflowing inbox. It's the back-to-back meetings. It's the TPS reports, but it's also a lot of good stuff. It's your kid's school play. It's the baseball game after, it's the trip to the national championship game to see Zion in his last collegiate appearance. Right? The whirlwind is both the good and the bad, but it's the stuff that just saps up the energy and oxygen in our life and holds us back from getting our most important work done. In order to fight through that, the antidote is accountability. And the way I like to think about accountability, it's the deliberate choice to ask for help in keeping your most important promises and commitments. All right, accountability, focus, efficiency, and momentum. I'm just quickly going through this because I want to wrap it up. And this ending on this quote, right? Without accountability, we fall into that self-satisfied mediocrity, the danger zone. We grade ourselves on a forgiving curve and end up slowly turning into something a little less impressive than we had originally hoped. I love this quote. It's in my office because I want to be reminded, right, that this is the antidote to that state of self-satisfied mediocrity. So today I promise to help you build clarity, confidence, and momentum, to defeat burnout and overwhelm, to create a life of purpose, passion, and impact. I hope that you have taken at least one really good nugget from this call. That's my hope. But now you got a choice, right? You have to decide, are you going to be intentional, to discover your values, develop a vision, do less better, embrace accountability? This is your Morpheus moment, right? You have a choice. Right, to take this and act on it, right? To move yourself forward or to stay where you are, right? To settle for the status quo. My great hope is that you're going to choose what's next. If you want some help, last thing, I've set aside some time over the next few days, really next week, because I'm traveling to Europe this evening, to talk. Very short number of calls that are free, 45 minutes with me, one-on-one. I just want to ask that you, again, a very finite number of these calls that I will be making available. Only schedule time to talk with me if you are in a serious state, right? In a lot of pain. If you want to just catch up, if you've enjoyed the talk, I want to hear about it and we can catch up later. But I want people who really need help to carve out some, or just get on my calendar and we can talk more about where you are, where you're going, what's holding you back, and start helping you to answer these critical questions. All right. Speaking of questions, do we have any? Susan, I know we're just at the end of time. I'm happy to hang on if anybody wants to chat a little bit, if we want to get to some questions. But for those who have to drop off, thank you. I hope you've had a great experience here. And thanks, of course, to Duke for making this possible. Susan, do we have any questions that have come in? I'm sure
Hi,
there's
Ben.
been a lot
Yeah,
of chat
thank you.
action.
Yeah, before we just get to a question, I just want to jump in a reminder that we have two more great, amazing alumni exclusive webinars coming up. One on March 21st, one on April 4th. They will be as good as Ben's, we hope. And registration is filling up. They're both close to capacity, so I would run right over. The link is the bit.ly/Duke Careers. Run right over to register. And the other thing, just to let you know, if you are looking for a job, if you are looking to hire, if you know about a job, we have a new alumni job board, which is a great resource for anyone who's looking to connect to Duke talent, whether it's students or alumni. So that's alumni.duke.edu/jobs. We hope you'll have a look at it. Feel free to drop off if you have to. Ben, questions. We've gotten a lot of great questions. How about this one? Where should I be focusing my career development time? What will have the most impact?
Well, again, this is a question about what should I do? Again, I will always go back to, start with the question, who are you and what do you want, right? And what problem are you trying to solve? If, for example, you're trying to, you are feeling a relative level of insecurity at work, where should you focus your career development time? On those rare and valuable skills that will create a sense of indispensability in your organization or in your office. And I can't necessarily tell you what those are, but that's a great conversation to have with your manager, right? What are the things that most people are not willing to do that are going to have the greatest impact on the success of this organization over time? Again, if you're looking for growth, then you may, again, if you're trying to solve the problem for growth, then you may pursue that in a different area. But most of the time, people are, when they ask that question, they're feeling a little job insecure. And the secret there is always to focus on building rare and valuable skill, getting really good at the skills and capabilities that are most impactful and most meaningful to your business or your organization.
Great. We've got some more questions, Ben. Again, if you need to jump off, that's fine, but Ben has graciously agreed to stay with us for a few more minutes. So Chris is asking, what are your thoughts about the thinking that focus on goals actually might be detrimental? Referring to some of the lines of thinkings on focus should be on good habits instead of goals.
Yeah, there's a great book on habits from a guy named James Clear that just came out. And in it, there's a wonderful quote that I wholeheartedly agree with, which is, you don't elevate to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your habits. And I would agree. I don't love the term goal. The process that I use in my coaching with both individuals and executives is something called OKR, objectives and key results. You need goals, because without goals, you eventually, if you don't have any goals, you'll work your way into that danger zone. You'll get to 6, 7, 8, right? But you'll never get out of that danger zone, because goals, or the way I use it, objectives, are the thing that says, okay, what's the next thing, right? What's the next big, hard, or important challenge, opportunity, or problem that I need to solve? And that's what actually allows you to create the leverage that you need to get out of the danger zone. Because again, that zone of self-satisfied mediocrity, complacency, comfort feels really good. It's like Goldilocks, right? Not too hot, not too cold. And most people spend the rest of their life there. So if you do not want to be that person, then you need goals, right? You need some kind of aspirational objective to which you're working for.
Great, thanks, Ben. That was really thought-provoking. Michelle is writing in and she says, what happens when you have some level of clarity, but you really aren't making progress with achievement? So then it makes you wonder, are you on the right track?
So there's an interesting little equation, and I'm going to type it into the chat function. LC equals BP. LC stands for life condition. BP stands for blueprint. Your sense of like overall happiness, satisfaction, well-being is often, directly related to your expectations. And so, the blueprint is like your life condition. This is like where I am personally and professionally, how much progress that I have made. if your expectation is that you should be, let's just say you're 30 years old and you should have a net worth of $100 million by 30 because Mark Zuckerberg had a net worth of $100 million by 30, chances are you're not there yet, right? And you're going to feel like heck because dang it, he's there and I'm not, and shoot, right? That means your blueprint is off, right? So the timing, your sense as to by when is an incredibly important factor in that determines how you feel about any particular state, where you are in the process. So I would encourage that person to pressure test her assumptions or his assumptions about where they are and where they should be. It may be that they are exactly where they need to be and they're making exactly the amount of progress that they could reasonably expect to make. It's just that their expectations are a little out of whack and therefore they need to recalibrate.
Great, thank you. So Jackie is asking, what do you do if there are a few different things that you truly deeply want and they actually don't really overlap? They would take you in completely different directions.
Jackie, one word: choose. You got to prioritize. We all have things. I mean, I want to be a great dad. I want to be a great, business person. I want to be a great skier. I want to be a great kite surfer, which I'm currently stinking at. I want to play the guitar. Like, none of these things are bad, right? But the reality is there will always be more. This is one of my favorite quotes. There's always going to be more great ideas than time to achieve them. Right? There's always going to be more great goals or aspirations than time to achieve them. Your challenge is to choose. And you just have to decide that that's what needs to happen. And I know it hurts a little bit, when you say, oh, I'm closing the door on something that I always thought that I loved. But in my experience with working with men and women like you who have lots and lots of great opportunities and options, almost inevitably, once they achieve the one thing, now they have space and time and maybe even resources that allow them to go pursue that next thing. So it's not like you're closing the door forever on any one opportunity. It's just that you do need to prioritize. You need to focus, because there's no other way to really do anything well when you're focused on a variety of different things, when you're spread thin. It's that success paradox.
Thank you so much, Ben. I feel like we've used so much of your time and we appreciate so much you giving back to the Duke community. And as Ben said, you can email him with your follow-up questions if you didn't get your question asked, and he's offering again generously a few calls for people who are really kind of struggling to figure all this out. But thank you for joining us. Thank you to Ben, and I hope we'll see most of you back for our next alumni webinar on March 21st.
Thank you, Susan, and the entire Duke alumni team. Thanks for making this happen. Speaking as a Duke alumni, I can't wait for the next few of these webinars. I'll be on those too. So thanks for making this happen. I think this is just a great thing for Duke, and so thrilled to be a part of it in its infancy. Thank you all.
Great. Have a great rest of your day, Ben.
All right. Bye now.